Welcome to Modern Latin America in 15 minutes. My name is Dr. Kim Richardson, and today we are going to discuss Brazil, coffee, slavery, and abolition in a mere 15 minutes. Is that possible? Absolutely. We're going to do so. Brazil then in the 19th century. If, as a little bit of a review, you recall from previous lectures, from 1822 to 1831, that's called the First Empire of Brazil. Pedro I is going to be the emperor. However, because of other concerns, the economy was down, and also because of concerns over the successor to the throne in Portugal, he ended up abdicating in 1831. He abdicated in favor of his son, way down here, Pedro II, following Pedro I, but he's too young to really rule. So, in his stead, until he's old enough, which is supposed to be 1844, it's going to be the regency, which lasts 1831 to 1840. First, there's a liberal regency, 1831 to 1837, as you can imagine. But then following the liberal regency, there's a period which was illiberal, more conservative. But at this time, it's very difficult to say for, in the case of Brazil, conservatives or liberals. But anyway, so it's called the regresso here, with a regress, right, from 1837 to 1840, in which the conservatives really are in power. Now, the liberals are upset at this, so they, which I know doesn't make sense for liberals, ask the emperor, who is now 14, he says, hey, why don't you come to the throne 4 years earlier than you're supposed to? You want to do that? And he says the famous, eu quero, I want. All right, then. So as of 1840, then, the Second Empire of Brazil is inaugurated. And it's going to last until 1889. We want to talk in the next 10 minutes about that entire period. Okay, not really. We know that Pedro II, he's still a little boy when he's asked to be the emperor, the second. He is going to, his full name, I always have to say it once, is Dom Pedro de Alcântara, João Carlos, Leopoldo, Salvador, Bebiano, Francisco Xavier, de Paula, Leocádio, Miguel, Gabriel, Rafael, Gonzaga, de Bragança, e Bourbon. Now you say that 3 times fast, and that's his name. All right, the most important thing with Brazil this time is the export agriculture, and the export agriculture at this point is coffee. Coffee is making the vast majority of income for the Empire of Brazil. And simply put, in 1821 to 1830, coffee made up 18% of the total revenue coming from Brazil, of going to Brazil. And from 1881 to 1890, the export increased. Coffee made up 61% of the total revenue from Brazil. In other words, coffee was the most important crop in all of Brazil. And it's important because it's exported. That means every time it's exported, the government gets to have the charge tariffs, right? The export duties, the taxes, and so they make a lot of money. So it is conducive to the government to encourage the export of coffee, and coffee becomes the most important product. As they said at the time, Brasil é o café, e café é o negro. Brazil is coffee, and coffee is the Afro-Brazilian in this case, right? So here we got a coffee plantation, the mainstay of the economy of Brazil. Now we're going to see that this is not just unique to Brazil, but Brazil is a great example of looking at this export agriculture. Number 1 here is going to be, where did number 1 go? Right over here. The coffee fields, you're going to have to dry them out over here, the coffee beans, the little berries, and then you have to take the beans off, then you got to store them. The slave quarters are going to be right over here, especially on the sides here. Right here is called the Casa Grande, the big house. Every morning, the plantation owner comes out and tells the slaves what they're supposed to be doing for the rest of the day. And so it is everything. The landowner, the coffee business, export agriculture, that is Brazil in the second half of the 19th century. And as you can see here, once they get it all processed and everything, then they take it to the coast. Right? Eventually, they're going to have railroads to assist them taking it to the coast, but that's not immediate by any means. Okay, so Brazil é o café, café é o negro. And the British were wanting to get rid of slavery, period. Initially the slave trade, as you know, and then slavery altogether. The slave trade is going to be picking up at the first decades after independence. One of the reasons for that, well, before independence, 1811 to 1820, there was 32,700 slaves annually entering Brazil. These figures are not set in stone because we don't know exactly. 1821 to 1830, during that decade of independence, 43,100 slaves annually entering Brazil. So more slaves are entering Brazil. But the British only agreed to help the Portuguese, the Brazilians, I mean, if they agreed to abolish slavery. So as they said that in the 1830s, they were going to abolish slavery, but they didn't. That is going to be one of those laws for the English to see. Leis para inglês ver. Laws for the English to see. In reality, they don't have any plans to do it. So coffee is going to be very important. However, in the 1840s, the British said enough is enough, right? We are going to pass these laws that is going to say that if any ship comes into Brazil carrying slaves, then we are going to simply treat them as pirate ships and take the slaves and, of course, punish the pirates as being pirates. And, of course, the government of Brazil tried to do something about it, but they could not. You can't not fight against the British Empire very well this time. So they agreed to abolish the slave trade. But then they realized that it's going to be time to abolish slavery altogether. There are lots of reasons for this, from liberal abolitionists to the fact that it does not make economic sense according to the capitalist mentalities. So they begin to gradually abolish slavery. The Rio Branco law is passed in the 1870s saying, listen, anybody born after this state is going to be born into freedom. So they abolished slavery in the 1870s, correct? Maybe. Because still the slave or the children of the slaves, those that are born after this date, are going to have, or even before, are going to have to be raised by the landowner until they're 18 years old. And during that period, then the landowner can force those children to work as slaves for him. So it's sort of abolished slaves, but not really. In 1885, they passed a sexagenarian law stating that anybody over 60 years old could receive freedom. Yeah, also, look at this critically, that means that anybody over 60 years old who's too old to work gets to be let go and nobody's going to take care of them anymore. Still, that means that anybody born before this time, right, could be theoretically a slave for a long, long time, right? You're born before 1871, so let's say you're born in 1869, you could be a slave until you're 60, which would be way into the 1920s, into almost 1930. I mean, goodness gracious. Slavery would be extended then. And by this time, the Americans had abolished slavery, the Cubans are thinking about abolishing slavery. Well, they're actually putting in process gradual abolitionist design to abolish slavery. So what is going to happen is that the writing is on the wall, so the slaves simply decided to begin resisting. They rose up and they ran away. Now, oftentimes the military is asked to go catch them, but the military doesn't want to. That's not their job, they say, to go catch slaves. I mean, my goodness, we have better things to do. And not only that, a lot of former slaves had joined the ranks of the military, and they were not about to go and be slave catchers now that they're no longer slaves. They still are opposed to that whole system. They try, number 4 here, to bring immigrants in to replace slaves. But as they see here, many of these immigrants don't want to be replacements for slaves. So that is problematic. And so in May of 1888, the emperor is not in Brazil, but his daughter is, and she signs the freedom of the slaves, abolishing once and for all slavery. So, what do we got here? The monarchy of Brazil, the Second Empire, 1840 to 1889. But 1888, we just said, slavery is finally abolished. there are three pillars to the monarch, the Second Empire of Brazil. And if you imagine this as being a table, three legs to the table, if one leg comes off, you cannot keep it up. It's going to fall over. Well, the three legs are the slavocracy, the church, and the military. The slavocracy now has decided that they're no longer going to support the monarchy as a whole. Why? Because the monarch abolished their means of income. The monarchy did not even give them recompense for slaves. So they decide that they are not going to support the monarchy anymore. The church had begun at this time to fight against the state as well. In particular, two ideas came about. Who has the ultimate authority in the Catholic Church? The Pope or the monarch in the country in which you live? The monarchy said, we do. The church said, the Vatican said, we do. And so that causes the church to begin to lose support for the monarchy. I wrote a great book on this. I wrote a book on this that talks a little bit about this religious question at the time. And the third thing here, the military. The military are asked, one, to go catch slaves. They don't want to do that. And the military sees their authority being undermined. One thing that undermines, in a sense, their authority are two new ideas coming about: republicanism and the other thing that comes about is this whole idea of, what am I trying to say? Positivism. Positivism, that idea of order and progress, which we talked in the last discussion. So in 1889 then, the three of them, having stopped supporting the monarchy, they overthrew the monarchy. Actually, the military itself was responsible for overthrowing the monarchy, with the blessings, of course, of the slavocracy and the church. This picture here is 2 years before the overthrow, when they're going to Europe. By this time, Pedro II is an old man, he's sick, and so he's going to go to Europe. But I still like this picture here, getting on a ship, on this ship to go to Europe, and same type of thing here. That's going to occur 2 years after this here. So the monarchy is overthrown. That's the last monarchy in all of the Americas. That's it. And they institute a temporary government, as you always do, and then they make plans to establish a more formal republic. When they establish a formal republic, they're going to put this as their flag, and it's still the flag, order and progress. I believe I showed this in the last discussion, and that's saying that we are going to be positivists. And the two slogans of positivism is order and progress. Remember, the order is going to be peace in the countryside, so that you can stimulate foreign investment and internal investment as well, but progress so that you can have things to show the world, such as railroads, steam travel, telegraph lines. That's important. Really quickly then, the rest of the Americas too. This is what I'm trying to say, abolition. In the second half of the century, Brazil was a slavocracy, but now Brazil is going to get give its slaves its independence. In 1865, the United States granted independence. Cuba, 1886. Brazil, 1888. Those are the last three places to grant abolition of slavery in the Western Hemisphere. Brazil making the last one. The United States granted immediate abolition in 1865, but Cuba and Brazil, and here's the point, granted gradual abolition, slowly. As a result of this, and you can argue this, and it would be a good argument, but nonetheless, the United States had a 4-year very bloody civil war, and Latin America did not have a very bloody civil war. The war that's going to occur in Cuba, we'll talk about more next time, is going to be more one for independence, less one for abolition of slavery. And of course, what happens in Brazil is not a war at all. That is Modern Latin America in 15 minutes, especially discussing this time Brazil. I'm Dr. Kim Richardson.